So we've gone through the basics of morphology, and now you're going to use this knowledge in your linguistics project to detail how a child is showing their developing knowledge, and also maybe to discuss the challenges of the child in terms of their morphology usage. So here are some notes that I'd like you to think about and use when you're considering what to write and what to include. So first you should look for examples of derivational morphemes like you did for the activity with the paragraph. And you should also look at them where they may be lacking, right? And so remember, these are the sorts of suffixes that you might be seeing. Then you should be looking for examples of inflectional morphemes, right? Or where they are lacking. And when they're lacking, those are the aspects that you would talk about for the challenges. And again, here are some examples. Remember that I'm looking for you to use the terminology that we've covered. So talk about morpheme placement, the characteristics, the word characteristics, the morpheme type, and then you're going to use wording like this to discuss the derivational or the inflectional morpheme. So for a derivational morpheme, it's the morpheme, for example, full, that changes a part of speech of this word from a noun to an adjective. For the inflectional, it would sound like this: the morpheme s that modifies the word street to streets by number, right? And that by x is the point at which you discuss one of the 6 types. So by number, by gender, by tense, etc. Okay, so let's go through activity 5, where I'm going to ask you to identify the morphemes that serve as evidence for the child's developing understanding of morphemes in English, and then you should be looking for the morphemes that she's maybe not put or which she has applied incorrectly as evidence for some of the errors that the child has made. So at this point, you can find this activity in the Blackboard section where you're watching this video, or you can click on the icon on the PowerPoint and that will bring up the document that you can use to complete this activity. I'll give you a moment and then we'll come back together and go through it together. Okay, so let's talk about the evidence that serves as the child's developing understanding of morphology. So here, we're going to try and find examples of what the child is doing right in terms of morphology. So this would be the first one, right? She conjugated the verb to be into its right form, is, right? Because she's talking about the sister's name, and so is would be the right conjugation. And so here we can say she correctly conjugated the verb to be in the third person singular form of is, which is an irregular form. We also see mountains is correctly pluralized by attaching the inflectional suffix of s to the noun mountain to modify it by number. Miss, we see here that the conjugation is correct, so she correctly sort of did not add any sort of suffix onto this verb, which represents the correct conjugation for first person singular I. Was, again, she used the correct past tense verb of to be to reflect the first person singular I, and so these would be inflectional examples of inflectional morphemes. Am as well. So am is an irregular verb like the to be, where we saw with the is and the was in past tense and the am in present tense. And so am, although we didn't add anything necessarily in terms of, you know, adding a suffix or adding a prefix, what happened here is that the whole stem of the verb changed, but it represents the correct conjugation of the verb with regard to the person, right? The first person singular I. And then bigger, we see that the child has added the inflectional suffix er to the adjective big to modify the word, the adjective, by degree. Okay, so that represented all of the evidence for the child's developing understanding of morphemes. Please take note of the way that I sort of discussed it and use terminology to describe what I meant. This is the same sort of way that I would like to see you go about describing what the child does right in your linguistic projects. Okay, let's talk about now some of the morphemes that serve as evidence for some of the errors that the child made. The first one is sister. So here we see that the child has neglected to add the apostrophe s, the inflectional suffix, to modify the word by case. We also see that she has neglected to add the inflectional suffix to modify the word by person, right? Because she is supposed to be lives, not live. And so this is person because that s on the end of lives indicates he, she, or it, right? Third person singular. We also see that this girl has left off the inflectional suffix to modify play by verb tense, so that it reflected a sort of regular verb tense of played in past tense. We also see the unnecessary addition of the inflectional suffix s for person, where she didn't actually need to have it. What would be correct is we live, and she sort of added that on unnecessarily. The last one is separate. So here we see a derivational suffix that was neglected to be added to change the adjective separate into the adverb separately, and this is required to be an adverb because it's describing the verb live. Okay, so hopefully that made sense to you, and it also was an example of how you can talk about these different morphemes. I'm going to present to you an actual sample of a child's writing. This is closer to what you would be seeing for your linguistics project. And right now I would encourage you to go through the same process and find evidence for the child's developing understanding, and also evidence that serves as some of the errors that the child made. This one I'm not going to be doing with you, but feel free to use the activity. The document is listed in Blackboard under Unit 3, where we're watching this video in Morphology, or you can click on the icon that is showing on the screen and fill out that activity and submit it for questions if you have any questions. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of our lesson on morphology. Hopefully at this point you are able to identify root morphemes, prefixes, suffixes, simple and complex words. I hope you can discriminate between derivational and inflectional morphemes, as well as determine the type of inflectional or derivational morpheme, and definitely use that terminology to describe the use of morphology in writing samples. Thanks.